Hello YouTube, it's been a little while. We are back with a review of the Razer Wolverine controller. I will show you right here. I did an unboxing video for this a little while back. A couple weeks ago, I think about 3 weeks ago. And I just wanted to give an update and review the controller after seeing how it feels for a couple of weeks. So I'll start with my overall rating. I give this controller a 7.5 out of 10. I came from an Elite controller after using the Elite controller for about 2 years. Um, and that was the first time I'd ever used a controller with paddles. My general thoughts on the controller. It seems to be made for people with slightly larger hands than I have. The divots on the thumbsticks, the the depressed area here that you have on all Xbox controllers, is it seems to be a bit larger than your typical, or like wider, I should say, than your typical Xbox controller, and maybe also a little bit shallower, I want to say. And that changes the feel of the controller a bit. It's not a huge issue. Um, and at first, I found myself kind of trying to reach for the paddles, but I've kind of gotten used to them, the placement now after a couple of weeks, so I don't really notice that being as much of an issue anymore. Um, and the controller offers things that no other controller offers. At I would say a slight trade-off in the overall quality of the controller compared to, say, the Elite controller. So I'll kind of go through a alternating pro-con thing. But first, I just want to address the issue of dead zones. Um, so that's one of the reasons that I really wanted a new controller, is because my dead zones on my old Elite were, my right stick's dead zone was about 14% on that thing, maybe even a little bit higher when I got, by the time I'd gotten this one, which is really terrible for games like for any game where you're trying to track someone with an automatic weapon or counter recoil. Is just 14 is just huge. Um, and so, of course, I was very happy on the new controller when I found my right stick dead zone started at 5%. My left stick dead zone started at a bit higher, about 10%, which is a little bit disappointing for a new controller. Um, in the past, I don't really know what's typical for a new controller because I don't get them so often. But seemed a little bit disappointing. Nevertheless, after 3 weeks, that's bumped up to about 8% on the right stick, and still at about 12% on the left stick. So it's not quite as responsive as I'd hoped, to have those dead zones be as small as possible without having any drift happening. But it's manageable, and it's still pleasant to play on. Not quite as nice as the 5% was at first. However, the triggers have dead zones, which they have the hair trigger switches, just like the Elites up here. But the trigger dead zones are kind of big, way bigger than I thought they'd be. I remember when I first got my new Elite, I could feel the trigger pull was very clean. It would fire as soon as I pulled the trigger, even just a little bit, which I really liked. It's really nice for sniping and stuff. But this one has about, I'd say, a millimeter of dead zone on the trigger pull, which I don't really like. I don't like having to ride the trigger while I'm playing. So now I'll just run through, now that we've covered the dead zones, I'll just run through an overall pros and cons list. So the pro, and what I was referring to when I said it can do things that no other controller can do, is that it has 6 programmable buttons. So in addition to your 4 paddles on the back, you also have these 2 extra buttons on the top, nestled in between your bumpers. And that's a really nice function. It's just great to not have to claw or generally take your thumbs off the sticks to do your inputs. The con is that you cannot reprogram all the buttons in the Razer app, the Wolverine app. For Fortnite it's okay, because you can map all your buttons in game, but In Halo, I had to use the Xbox Accessories app as well as the Razer Wolverine app, and that was a bit of a hassle. So I would really love to see them integrate that functionality into the Wolverine app, if possible. If Microsoft, if they provide an API to do that. So the next pro that we are going to look at is the paddle responsiveness. The paddles click, very, very quickly, so that's nice. It's a plus. I require not too much force. They feel great. I mean, the paddles feel pretty great. The placing was strange at first. It took some getting used to. I'm still getting used to it a little bit, but I think it'll be fine in the end. And kind of a plus for these paddles is compared to the Elite, where I was pressing them with my ring and pinky fingers. For these ones, I have them set up on my middle fingers and ring fingers, which was strange at first, but overall the pinky has a little bit less dexterity for most people than the other fingers, and so it's nice to not have to bring the pinky into the equation. To offset that, I'll say the next con that I have down is, well, I talked about the trigger dead zone, so I'll just reiterate that and move on to the next pro. Another pro I have is that the paddles do not fall off. To me, this is a pro because I like to have all the paddles on. Maybe some people would prefer having the option to have them off so they don't pull them accidentally. But I had a problem with the with my Elite that I would accidentally pull them off when I was setting the controller down and stuff like that. So that was kind of annoying. So I prefer the firm paddles, the paddles in place. The next con that I have is kind of a big one for some people. There's no wireless option for this controller. You have to plug it in. It has a 10-foot braided cable, and the cable is really nice. And that kind of leads into my next pro, I guess, which is that the cable connection on the top is very sturdy. So you see, I had to really yank that out of there because it's actually there's a cave, I guess you could say, for it, and that prevents you from breaking that connection by hitting this. My last Elite, actually, that top connection broke when I dropped the controller once, which led to me not being able to plug it in, which is a real hassle because, for one thing, then I couldn't use it for PC tournaments since it was a first-gen Elite. So yeah, big. I'd say that's a plus overall here. I had to learn to finick with it because I was so used to just using a much flimsier one, but it's really quite nice, I think. So I don't have the lighting enabled right now. I turn it off. I'm just not one for bells and whistles, but some people are going to really think this rainbow lighting that'll come across here is really cool. You'll see it in their promos. And let's see. Let's look at another con. The zipper on the case. So I'll go into the case here. The case is its own area. The case is a weak point overall on this controller for a few reasons. One, I'd say the zipper on the case feels flimsy. It's not like a nice thick metal zipper, I guess. It just doesn't feel as sturdy as the zipper on like the case for an Elite controller. So I'm worried that that's gonna wear down over time, and not a big deal. The bigger deal is that the cable does not fit easily in the case with the controller. That's a kind of a hassle. I mean, yeah, it's not a big deal to have to carry the cable around outside of the case. But it would really be a lot sleeker if they just made the case bulge a little bit more so you could really fit it into the case easily. Fit the cable in the case with the controller. I don't know what the thinking was on that, but I'll say another pro is it has these two functions built in to the mappables. They're called focus and agile. Agile is made for strafing, which amplifies an input on your stick, so you can put that on your left stick and amplify your input and make it easy to have a crispy strafe. I don't actually use that one, but the cooler one to me is focus, where if you hold the button down and move a stick, it will reduce the input. So basically, you can say you're in a gun battle and you need precise aim. Maybe you're nervous, your hands might be shaking a little bit. It's tournament. Well, you could hold your focus button and your stick input will be reduced. So that one's actually really nice. And I've started to use that a bit. I think that one is a bit of a learning curve. Let's see. I think I've covered all the cons. So the rest of the stuff is pros. Um, I think a pro is that I think the grip design is a bit better than that on the Elite. I don't think these grips on the back here, sorry, I should show them to you, are gonna fall off, which is something a lot of people have complained about with the Elite controllers, and something that I experienced with my Elite controller. I'd say another pro is I talked about the paddle placement, so I don't have to reiterate that. Um, I'd say another minor pro is that the profile switch button, the button that lets you switch between your saved profiles, button profiles, is out of the way here. It was rare, but I occasionally would accidentally flip the switch in the middle of the Elite controller. Down, and on this controller, it's down here out of the way. You're not going to hit it by accident. You also have some other nice functions built in down here. Um, you have a mute your mic function. You have a volume adjustment function, and you have your mapping on the fly function, which is pretty nice. And I went over the cable connection. So that's pretty much everything I have. Overall, I like the controller. I wish the dead zones were lower. I'm going to have to wrap this video up because I'm getting a disk space warning. So I hope you enjoyed. Overall, would recommend the controller. Price point's about 160, 170, comparable to Elites. And those extra buttons are really nice, and the extra functions overall are really nice. So good job, Razer.